going up, you can speculate through financial tools, and you can almost guarantee profits, such as generators during an outage. And I don't recommend doing this for anybody, because when things do turn over and they do change the currency, you're going to be stuck with 10,000 generators that are going to be worthless also. So don't go down. You're also going to be hurting people by doing this because you're taking advantage of them. So don't do this when this happens. If you wanted to take advantage of the times now and buy what you can now before it becomes bad. So it is important to manage expectations before the inflation genie is let out of the bottle, as they say. So this is much more effective than price controls, which, by the way, never work. And if the government ever does resort to this, then you should buy as much as you can. But food and energy always goes up at least twice as fast as any other asset during times of inflation. Why? Because you need food and you need energy. With more inflation, there's a need for more currency to reflect the higher prices, which furthers the inflation. So typically they just, instead of a $10 bill, they'll just add zeros. It'll be a $1,000 bill, and then it'll be a $10,000 bill, and yeah, Zimbabwe comes to mind as well. Okay, so that was a recap of the first four, and that was 30 minutes. So each one was approximately 30 minutes before. So that is really a condensed version, and I hope I didn't condense it too much. I took a lot of the Spirit of Prophecy. I had many quotes from Ellen White, Spirit of Prophecy, and other resources as well. So I highly do recommend going back to those if you can. Now this is part 5, and this is inflation and statistical manipulation. This is controlling the problem and reaction. So this is Mark Twain. This was a famous quote. He said, "There are lies, damned lies, and statistics." Now, damned, adjective, in Christian belief means condemned by God to suffer the eternal punishment in hell, which is our end of our existence, amen? All right, the government manipulates statistics to its benefit. By their understanding of inflation, now they do understand what's happening, the government is able to lower interest rates on debt it must pay for. And how do they do this? If it then lowers inflation-adjusted payments it makes to Social Security and government employees, and they're able to keep the consumer inflation expectations under control. So these are general statements, and I'm going to go into how they do each of these. And this allows the government to spend more money that it does not have. So then by artificially lowering the inflation, they're able to boost the GDP and show a stronger economy than what is in reality. So this strengthens the dollar and allows higher than normal purchasing power. And finally, it keeps the miry clay voters passive because benign inflation is not an issue. If you don't know what's actually happening, why do you have to worry? You can just drink your fluoride and we'll all go back to sleep and we'll be fine. Okay. But by increasing inflation, or literally more deficit spending, the government is able to buy more goods for worthless pieces of paper. Now, I believe China and these are also, this is what happens with trade wars, and we're going through that currently. And this is when we continue to debase, and then it continue to have a debasement back and forth before all of them are destroyed. And that's basically where we're coming. But this in return lowers the real value of debt, which helps to pay for larger government without raising taxes, and in turn forces more workers into the workforce. Isn't that what the big deal was a few years ago with Obama being in office as well? We had a great recession, which led many people out of the workforce. So they understand how this works. What do? They increase inflation. They put $700 billion into the TARP funds, which we saw in part 1. If you go back, the money multiplier, they actually create 10 times that. So it was $7 trillion they created, and by putting it into this TARP fund. So the government was then able to buy more goods for these worthless pieces of paper. Now, I mean worth less. It's not completely worthless yet. But in turn, it lowers this value of debt, And now they don't have to raise taxes yet. And then it forces more workers into the workforce. Now, what's the problem with forcing more laborers in the workforce? That's good, right? Isn't that what we all want? We want a lot of people in the workforce. All right, but because as prices go up, families, women especially, now who would be against families? Is there anyone that's against families? Satan. Satan's against families. Because, I mean, what were the two things that were instituted in the garden? Families and the Sabbath. So if he can wipe out families, what's coming next? Okay. So he wants to get these women especially to sacrifice more of their time and effort, which means distraction, to pay for their basic necessities. So the families break up due to these financial fights. Is this not the number one probably reason of, okay, this is nothing new. They know this. They know what they're doing. It's not. So the families break up due to this. Oh, and a result of more workers in the work system, families break up due to the financial fights, resulting in more power to the state. How can I say that? How do they have more power? You guys think? For example, there's more need on child services. This creates more stresses on the families, which causes more divorce, which results in breakups and fights. And now there's even more need for child protective services, such as family courts, more police, and for demands more of the society to get together and to unite as a community. Oh, another uniting factor. Huh. Yes?
When you say an example, child services, give me an example of what a child service that perpetuates the
Sure.
need from law.
I'm not condemning child services in any way as far as. Sure. So, child protective services. You know, these kind that come in and they have more power because they can literally take from the families if they deem that the state, that the parents are not, right, providing for the children the way that the state dictates it, so they could come in, right? I didn't go as far as that, but since you put me on the spot, that's a little more. So, which again brings more power to these Babylonian elite. So, then there are asset prices rising along with all the sales and taxes and property taxes rising. So by this inflation, the property taxes increase and the sales taxes increase. Are we seeing this today too? I remember sales taxes being like 3%, and then all of a sudden I remember going to like 6%, in some states 10%, I think California, sales taxes now. So the property taxes increase, sales taxes increase, and these are a percentage of the sales or the asset price, right? So every time that you sell something, you have to pay a portion of it back. So let's say a pair of shoes was $100 when you bought it with a 6% sales tax. The government would take $6, but if the inflation kept going up, now those shoes cost $200. The government now takes home $12, and they didn't even have to do anything but create more money in taxes. So again, this is how the government benefits by the assets rising. Now what's even crazier is the taxes on cars. I find that you buy a car, you pay taxes, and then you should be done, right? But no, then they come back and every year you get more taxes. It's like buying a pair of jeans that you wore for 20 bucks, and then next year they say, we're going to reassess your jeans are still worth $15. We're going to send you another 6% charge. It's crazy, and we fall for it. It's hilarious. I don't know what else. It's not hilarious. It's very sad, but it's unbelievable the state that we are in, and we all think it's normal because we've been, kind of just numbed down to the whole thing. So this then forces more families into these higher tax brackets by this inflation growing and incomes growing and the demand for more money. So now you're getting into higher tax brackets. And by more families, because they're now also both have to work, both parents have to work, that automatically puts you higher. But you're only fighting for a peon of what you were in 1950s as far as what money was worth back then as compared to today. So by more families working, making more dollars, and you have the bracket creep, allowing the government to tax at a progressively higher tax rate. And they also tax the money that is sitting in your savings account every year when you do your taxes. So we can see the balance of the governmental systems is trying to take, and they want to eat their cake, and they want their cake and they want to eat it too, excuse me. So they want to be able to spend their money that they have out there, but they don't want us to understand it. Because if we did, it would basically make the entire system completely unstable, and their end would come to this entire game. And finally, by increasing inflation, it makes people to believe that they're getting richer. So there was a case to be made in the end of the 1990s with the stock market when everybody was paying cash for cars. You guys remember that? The big stock market boom? And during the housing bubble, with the house that they bought 20 years ago for $50,000, now worth $500,000, we're all getting rich. These people progressively took out more loans. They took on their vacations. I've heard of this now. There's a vacation. This is back. A vacation. You can get a loan for a vacation now. You can go to a bank and they will give you a loan specifically to go take a vacation. Yeah, look that one up. That one just came out like a month ago. I said, well, here we are again. We're right back into the crazies. All right, so these people progressively took out more loans. They took vacations. They bought all these things that come with, quote unquote, wealth, because this television tells you what wealth is, right? This other vision out there. And then the reality hits us in the face. So I want to give you examples. I'm a big example guy, and just to show you kind of visually how this kind of works, okay? So you have inflation, example A. You have a starting asset price of $100,000, say it's a house, and the ending asset price, say 10 years later, you buy a house today, and 10 years later, you sell it for $200,000. Now, in that time, the starting dollar value was worth $1. But in 10 years, let's say it had dropped to 90 cents to $1 that you can still purchase today. So, ending real asset value would be $180,000. That's that 200,000 times 90, right? 90%. Inflation example B, starting asset price 100,000, exactly the same, but the ending dollar value, let's say, is 10 cents to the dollar. Your ending real asset value is worth $20,000 after inflation. So this is what they do to hide the truth. So before, we have your nominal income. Here's your $100 or $100,000 asset price. Here's your selling price, $200,000. You sell it and you say, I made $100,000. This is great. Well, you didn't even look into your inflation amount. So this one shows your inflation is up here, and here's your real value that you actually came. Now, on the other asset, if they've depreciated and devalued your dollar so much, this is really what you made, and all the rest of it is fluff. It's nothing. So this is a video, and I am not a proponent of any, I will say this, of any Republican left-to-right paradigm, but what I do find is many politicians, before they come into power, will speak a lot of truth, but when they come into power, their fruit is very easy to tell what they really are, because they do opposite of what they say quite often, or what they were promoting originally, or they find a loophole in the back end that, well, I meant it like this or something, or they just don't bring it up anymore. So this is an older video that was from President Ronald Reagan before he was president, and he's the one that actually, I thought, explained this pretty well on how the government hides the truth. So we'll listen to this.
Riddle: when is a tax not a tax? Answer: when it's inflation. I'll be right back. I know it's a cliche, and we've all heard it and said it ourselves, that inflation is the cruelest kind of tax, hitting hardest those who can least afford it. I wonder, though, if we really understand that inflation is, in fact, a tax increase, a way government can raise more revenue without raising the rates. Take capital gains. Now, this is the profit you make if something you bought a while back has become more valuable and you sell it for more than you paid for it. This can be a farm, a home, a lot you were going to build on and didn't, that old car that suddenly became valuable to a collector, or stock you bought. But what if your increased sale price is an increase in dollars that aren't worth as much as they were when you bought it? If you sell your home for twice what it cost, but all homes are now worth twice what they cost because the present dollar is worth only 50 cents, then you haven't made any profit. But the tax collector says you have. If you paid $20,000 and sell for $40,000, he says you've made $20,000 upon which you must pay a tax, even though $40,000 today will only buy what $20,000 bought at the time of purchase. The answer is very simple, but not too many politicians are going to suggest it. The sales price should be computed in constant dollars, meaning the dollars should be valued at their purchasing power now compared to their purchasing power when you first acquired the property. Let's turn to your paycheck, because here's where the government really profits from inflation. We have a progressive income tax. As your income increases, you find the government takes a higher percentage, say, of the second $10,000 you earn than of the first. Now, let's say you get a raise simply to keep even with the increased cost of living, to make you able to buy what you could before the raise. But you can't. For that increase in the number of dollars puts you into a higher tax bracket. The government takes a greater share of those new dollars, and suddenly you find you haven't kept up with inflation. After taxes, you're worse off than you were before the raise. 9 times out of 10, though, you blame high prices, not your taxes. Now, let's take an actual example. The man who earned $10,000 a year in 1966 earns, if he's the average, $15,000 today. That $5,000 increase is a little more than the increased cost of living. Actually, $3,800 of his raise is eaten up by inflation. Still, he should be $1,200 better off than he was in 1966. But not after taxes. At $15,000, he's in a higher tax bracket. The government takes the $1,200 plus $159 more, making him $159 worse off than he was in 1966. Now, there's an answer, a very simple one, a proposal by Senator James Buckley of New...
All right, I don't look at the promotion part, so we'll go from there. He's going into another part of that, and I'm more on the Bible, and I believe God's 10% and a flat rate across everybody. Amen. Okay, so that would be me generally, and the rest of that is kind of promoting whatever politics he had. So I'm not going to go into the rest, but just to get the point across that sometimes they do speak a little bit of truth, and they know what's going on. That's what the other point is. He was the president. He knew what was going on as well. So has anything changed over the years? No. Exodus 5 states, "And the king of Egypt said unto them, Wherefore do you, Moses and Aaron, let the people from their works get you unto your burdens? And Pharaoh said, Behold, the people of the land now are many, and you make them rest from their burdens." Happy Sabbath, everybody. "And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, You shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as herefore let them go and gather straw for themselves." This is your taxes and inflation now. "And the tale of the bricks which did make heretofore, you shall lay upon them. You shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God." We need to have more people in the workforce, right? Especially women. Wow. Because they're too idle. Wow. "Let there be more work laid upon men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spake to the people, saying, Thus saith Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go ye, get ye straw where ye can find it. Yet not aught of your work shall be diminished. So the people were scattered abroad throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw." This is an exact life example of where we are today. So, one more example for you. Multi-purpose woodworking tool. This was over the years, okay? In 1950, it cost you $169.50 for a multi-purpose working tool. 1980, it cost you almost $800, and by 2009, almost $3,000. Now, the federal minimum wage in 1950 was 75 cents per hour. 1980 was $3.10, and 2009 was $7.25. So the hours to work, yes, sir? Yes, it is. Well, this is federal. There are states that have different. So it is still federal minimum wage. So the hours to, and this is 2009, the hours to work to buy this multi-purpose tool would it should be 1950, would be 226 hours. In 1980 is 256, and by 2009 it could take you 413 hours. Now you see why everybody has credit cards and why they're all in debt. And why you work even harder, because now you have interest to work on top of this because you can't even pay it off. So in 1950, your average cost of a new car was $1,750, which is 2,300 hours. 1980, $7,210 average cost of your new car. Not too much of a difference, $2,325, but by 2009, and now you know it's much higher than this, $23,907 average cost, and it'd take you 3,298 hours of work to pay. So the hidden cost of inflation causes higher taxes with this bracket creep. It's an equitable trade. You work more and you get less. It's more thievery, and the government's happy taking your money as well. And makes happy users and socialists as they'll get more with less risk. So these are the interest chargers, because they have less risk, and subsidy to foreign producers. They don't suffer from the same tax burdens. Now, I was going to put in a clip from this book as well, but my wife said don't do it, so I did not listen to her. So this is George Orwell from the book 1984. If any of you have not read it, if he would have been a Seventh-day Adventist and changed his life, I believe God gave him a glimpse of the prophetic vision, and he could have done much for the Lord, I believe, but that's that. So he said, freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. So are we granted to say that 2 + 2 = 4? Or as he was being charged at the end of the book, the gentleman that was speaking to him kept putting up 4 fingers, and he says, how many, Winston? How many have you seen? And he says, 4. And he says, no, the government says it's 5. How many is it? And he says, 4. And they keep putting the shocks higher and higher and higher. And they say, well, we're re-educating you. You need how many now? And as they put it higher and higher, he begins to fold under the pressure. And he says, 5. I mean 4. And he says, now you can see how this works. So, and the very last thing the commander stated in that as well was, if you want to see the future of the human race, imagine a boot stamping on the face of a human for eternity. That's the future. I said, wow, this was one of the first books I read before becoming a Seventh-day Adventist, and it woke me to much as well. And I said, wow, God is good, though. He leads us. So how do they do it? How do they make 2 + 2 = 5? So the main way the government lies to us is through the Consumer Price Index, or otherwise known as the CPI. So it was originally a basket of everyday goods and services, and as the prices went up or down over the year, the basket of inflation was measured. So this is already a lie. If they really wanted to measure inflation, as I mentioned earlier, it's always a monetary event. If they really want to measure inflation, they would simply measure the amount of the money supply and not the symptoms of inflation. That's why I love Christ, because he says take an axe to the root, right? We don't play games by just mopping up a little bit and thinking that's going to fix the hole in the bucket. We need to go and get a new bucket and a new vessel. So take the total amount of money in circulation and measure it if it went up or down, and that is the true inflation, not by measuring the symptoms of more money in the supply. So they manipulate the CPI in various ways. The first being hedonic adjustments is what it's called. So in this case, if a car goes up in price from, let's say, $20,000 to $21,000, On the face value, it would show a 5% increase in the price. Now, the government doesn't want to show a 5% increase of inflation, so it creates an adjustment which takes into an account an added value of the options added during that current year. So they arbitrarily create a dollar figure of value of, let's say, a better standard radio, or better tires, or it has a lumbar support, or upgraded cloth seats and an exhaust. So the government may say that it adds $1,500 to the value of the car. So when calculating for the inflation, the price of the car went down 2.5% to $19,500, which is this $21,000 minus the $1,500 of added value. This is why cars keep getting fancier and fancier, and all the gadgets. Isn't it wonderful? Give me a 1950 something and I'm fine. Don't, at least if it broke, you know how to fix it. So thereby showing deflation in this inflated price. So it does not matter if you don't need or want or even value the options. The government needs to reflect the lower inflation, so they will manipulate the numbers in many different ways. So another trick that they use, let's say a 12-ounce soda, which I hope nobody here drinks, praise the Lord, is $1, and now are being sold in smaller cans of 10 ounces instead of 12 ounces, and they still charge $1. So you lose 17% of your product, which costs more per ounce, but the government still says that it's still a can of soda, and it's the same price with no inflation. So you lost 17% of your buying power, but since the price didn't go up, the government says there is no inflation in the system. Now we see why. I remember when ice cream and stuff, my dad had a big falling out with ice cream when it went from like a gallon to like a half gallon, and it went to quarts, and he's like, what's going on? I said, that's inflation. But they just don't want to show you that. They're going to start to charge you the same amount. Substitution is the second way. This is what I call the switcheroo. So if inflation cannot be tamed through hedonics, they simply substitute the product in the basket with a less expensive product. So say the original CPI basket had a filet mignon, which I, again, don't eat, but again, just for simplicities, and the price went from $9 to $10 a pound. They simply substitute it with porterhouse steak at $6 a pound and say that inflation went down to eat meat. But they could also, and they do this, substitute it with ground beef or chicken, pork, and even, they've done this, dog food. Plus, the very fact that people would substitute a higher product for a lesser one because of the cost is a clear evidence of inflation, yet they use this to understate it. So if housing prices get too expensive, they use renter equivalents to rental rates. So let's say you rented your house and say the price is going out of control and the rent is probably went up much less than the house did, so they switch these two out. And they can use this interchangeably at any time. And finally, remember that it's all about containing your expectations, as I had mentioned in part 4 as well. What's what the whole point of inflation is. Number 3, weighting. This is the final one. When all of these methods do not work, then the government just changes the weighting of the hotter category with a lesser one. What do I mean by this? For example, when healthcare and education are notorious for rising costs, so they make up 20% of the economy for the CPI, and the government might only weigh it at 15%, lessening the effect of the overall number. Or they might weight certain regions of the country more than others. So they'll take, let's say, California and Washington, D.C., Texas are going up faster than all the other states. They just go and weigh it on something like Ohio, North Dakota, and North Carolina that are lower, so that they can have a higher weighting on these and lower the expectations. Or they might weight discretionary consumables that are known to fall in price, that we buy infrequently and are not vital more than necessities that we need to buy every day. So let's say your classic HD TVs are getting 60% weight over food and energy at 40%. They'll just kind of weight it a little bit here and there and get what they need to. Now God talks about this, doesn't he? Weighting. In Proverbs 11:1, he says, "A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." Proverbs 20:23, "Diverse weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good." Now we see, God knew, he foretold us. We're either blinded by all the deceptions that are going on around us, or we don't want to know, we close our eyes and ears to it, and we say, what can we do? So when all else fails, the government just doesn't count it at all. They literally do this. They will cut out food, energy, and taxes out of the equation 100%. And these three factors aren't even counted into the equation. And I don't know about any of you, but this is where I spend most of my money, and are the three things that I care about the most in my budget: food, energy, and taxes, because Jesus said we should pay them. The government can also export inflation by sending money overseas, so it never hits our economy. Any of you ever travel out of overseas? We have a show of hands? Yeah? You ever notice that everywhere you go, the US dollar is accepted? That's called us exporting our inflation to the other countries. So if money can also be pushed into stocks and it does not enter the economy, so this is why you have we'll match you, if you get your 6%, we'll match you 401k 6 for 6. Keeps the inflation down and the expectations lower because it's not in the economy. You have restrictions that you can't take your money out until you hit 60-umpteen years of your life before that. So this benefits the state as well, especially when there is a orchestrated fleecing of the public through crashes. I'm almost done. I know some of you guys this is a lot of information for one day, I understand. So prices rise based off of social, demographic, economic, monetary, or physical reasons, causing real wages to fall and tip off the inflationary spiral. So they create large budget deficits, and then new government debt is issued. The existing maturing debt is refinanced, usually in the short-term debts. This limits the demand for the new supply of the money and the refinancing of the maturing debt. This forces the central banks to monetize the new debt, which causes pressure to raise interest rates due to the depreciating currency. This is where we are specifically right now, causing the increase in interest payments, which we are at right now. Has anyone noticed that the interest rates are starting to inch up? Okay, and then what happens? The new money enters in and causes higher inflation. You guys ready for the higher inflation, or is it already happening? How's your gasoline prices gone? Up like $1, right? But that's because of this. And now we have larger budget deficits. That's in the news today, isn't it? You know what they're talking about? Oh, we're over $1 trillion and this hasn't happened since. Okay. The government continues to issue what? More debt. And now we have more and more existing maturing debt being refinanced, which limits demand. So when this is being refinanced, it's not being refinanced into the 0.25%. Now it's being refinanced into 1.25%. Which means we need to come up with more interest payments. And how do we get money for interest payments that the government has to pay? You raise taxes. So that the central bank monetizes new debt, which puts pressure to raise rates, this is where we are, due to depreciating currency, causing an increase in interest rates and causing higher inflation. And then we continue just to follow the entire thing over and over and over. And it seems like every 4 years, they're pretty good at timing this. They like to put this at the top of the budget, right? Right about the time that a new president is going to come in, it just seems like oh, the refinance is up, okay, boom, okay, now we got to make a big deal about all this and vote for who we want you to vote for. But they're both sides are, and don't let the middle side or anybody else have a voice, so, okay. Quantitative easing, increasing of quantity, of the quantity of money in circulation by lowering rates to near zero. This is what we had in 2009, 2010. So instead of saying we are creating a ton of money and spending it anywhere we can, they use these nice words, quantitative easing. Go back to sleep. This monetary policy is sometimes called easy money. So, when this is coupled with a fiscal policy, or paper money, of deficit spending, it is designed to lessen the value of money and cause asset inflations that, of course, leads to bubbles. So as inflation rises, the government then begins to pay their minions. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word, but I did. I think it was a late night. Social Security recipients, government employees, food stamp receivers with delayed payments. That was a very bad word, and I apologize if I did offend anybody. Okay. In fact, when this happened in Russia, they went through their inflation of the 1990s. The teachers, the soldiers, the state workers, and the pensioners received their government money 3 months late. As inflation roared at 200% a month, this devaluing their pay as the government tries to slow the inflation. They're doing this also in Venezuela today as well. There's a lot of this going on. So as they're trying to pull this money back out of the system, when they don't introduce it, it kind of slows it a little bit. So anybody recognize this gentleman? Charles Ponzi. He was most famous for what they call the Ponzi scheme. We're very close to being at the end of this. So what is a Ponzi scheme? Charles Ponzi, we just saw, created a fraudulent investment operation that pays returns to separate investors from their own money, the investor's own money, or money paid by subsequent investors rather than from any actual profit earned. So no profit's ever been earned, but it's money that came in that's been promised. Okay, so let's give an example. So say you invested $10,000 to Charles Ponzi. The scam would pay you 15% or $1,500 back to you, and then use the rest of the money for the other investors and pocketing the majority for himself. Bernie Madoff did this as well, by the way. Meanwhile, the investor gets a piece of paper showing him the principal and the profit. So you get this piece of paper in the mail every month called a statement. You guys ever get these statements? Maybe like stock market statements and these kind of things. And oh my goodness, I'm gaining so much money. This is great. And you get a little bit of money back, and you're kind of like, oh, I got this much money. So you get other people interested in it. But all this money's already gone and paid out to other people. Oh. So the key is to have the victims and new clients based off of the above market returns. You promise people like 15% returns. And this is all a confidence games. As long as there's confidence in the investment, the game can get huge. Madoff was another, and he made off with $65 billion. So the government is using this same scheme in a much larger scale with Social Security. So let me give you an example. The first recipient, this is her, the first recipient of Social Security, her name was Ida Mae Fuller. Miss Fuller worked for about 3 years under the new Social Security program and paid $24.75 in payroll taxes. Her first Social Security check in January 1940 was for $22.54, almost her entire investment back. She almost got back in her very first payment. Miss Fuller, God bless her soul, lived to be almost 100 years old, so I could put her on this screen today. Amen. And she collected more than $22,000 in benefits. off of $24 in payroll taxes. Isn't that amazing? So this little picture right here, I don't know if you can read it. It says that this is illegal, and this is legal. And this guy right here says, step right up and give me a small investment. I can guarantee to quadruple your money for life with no risk. And then you have the legal version. Step right up, get a small investment. I can quadruple the quantity of your money for life with no risk. It's exactly the same. Just one with a top hat and the other one, without. So it's the same. Yeah, exactly. Ponzi schemes, Social Security, yeah. So the problem is now that the system now is broken and the government has spent all of the money and left only IOUs in return. This actually officially happened under the Clinton administration when they said that we had a budget surplus. We never had a budget surplus. They cashed out the savings of Social Security and they counted it as income for the government, which was double counting, but it's legal somehow. And then they get a boast and say that we paid off and we had a positive, which is impossible to have a positive because we have a Federal Reserve that never created the interest on the money to be paid off. So it continues to grow. Anyways, so the problem, that's the problem. And remember that also inflation and taxes are eating up any returns that you think you're getting. So this is Carl Quigley from the book Tragedy and Hope. I believe he was also a mentor of President Clinton. He, in his book, states, the current economic order is built to fail. It's designed to reap the greatest profits from the greatest amount of people. The value of goods are expressed in money, while the value of money is expressed in goods. Money and goods are clearly not the same things, but are exactly opposite things. Goods are wealth, which you have, while money is a claim on wealth, which you do not have. Goods are an asset, money is debt. If goods are wealth, money is clearly not wealth. It is negative wealth, maybe even anti-wealth. Wow. Carol Quigley, Tragedy and Hope. Now, anybody recognize this face? Yes, this was Alan Greenspan, and he was the Ched Fairbairn of the Federal Reserve for quite a long while. I remember him as a child, and he ran all the way up to, anybody know whose presidency? At least Clinton. Was he? Bush, yeah, that's it, Bush, yeah. We're all getting old. Okay, now, as I mentioned earlier about politics, and sometimes before they get into the wealth and the power, they seem to speak some kind of truth out there. And it's amazing how these things can change when the power comes around. But this was from a quote of his from 1966. I'll get the exact reference on the bottom. But Alan Greenspan stated, "In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. If everyone decided, for example, to convert all his bank deposits to silver or copper or any other good, and therefore decline to accept checks as payments for goods, bank deposits would lose their purchasing power and government-created bank credit would be worthless as a claim on goods. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. This is the shabby secret of the welfare statistics tirades against gold, Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statistics anathemism toward the gold standard. Alan Greenspan, Gold and Economic Freedom, 1966. Amazing. Now this is the end of this presentation. I could go on for another, but I know it's getting a little late, so I will hold off on doing such because I think this is information overload probably at this point. But I will open it up if anyone kind of has questions or comments or anything that I can kind of help you to address and might think that it would be good to share with others. I could get a microphone and we could do such. And if not, we can close out with a word of prayer. Sure. That one? That one? That's the one? All right, perfect. Okay. I see one over here.
Bryan, so in the scheme of all of this, how does this play in on the last days?
So, Ellen White had that's a great, she had a great quote that I did not have in this one. And I think that, I was thinking about that too, that I should have added this. Let me find it quickly, if I can. So how is this working for the last days? Of course we can't see it. That's okay, here we go. Okay, now, Ellen White stated, because I'm not claiming that I know everything, but I think that this one statement itself is quite good to kind of sum this up. So the present financial controversy, the controversy that was going on in her time was the aspect of a devaluing dollar. They were going through the Civil War, and they were having the greenback dollar, and they were also having a lot of people promoting a gold standard, which is where you get your book of the Wizard of Oz and such and so forth as well. Dorothy with they were silver shoes originally. So they were trying, and then they had a person that was running, his name was, he was running for president, it's the last name. It was Congressman, I believe, or Senator Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N. And he was trying to push his gold standard, and he was even in contact with Ellen White. So it's a little bit of backstory. But this financial controversy, which he was mentioning was about that, has been presented to me as one of Satan's masterpieces for the last days. So what does this have to do with the last days? There's a power moving from beneath, which is after the working of the great enemy, in regard to the circulating currency. This is not the devising of God, and the changing of the circulating currency. So as I showed you earlier, what happened to Rome was they debased the value, devalued it, and then they finally demolished it. They changed the circulating income at that point. Now, it puts in the other aspect, as I keep pointing out, is that it puts people into a uniting factor to unite around something because the love of money is so great that people will not be able to resist. They're going to say there is no other way, just like healthcare. This was a social experiment to see what would happen, because obviously you need something for your healthcare, but you have the fear, what am I going to do with my family? And you just allow things to work. So they step up, and this is what ends up happening. So what happens? This is not the devising of God. The changing of circulating currency. What will it affect, this changing of the circulating currency? It will cause a state of things that will bring oppression to the poor and create great distress. Does that sound like something that the Bible also speaks about? A time which will, such as never been, a time of great distress. It is one of the devil's schemes, and I thought those who believe the truth would not be deceived in the least degree upon this matter. So does that kind of, so what this is leading to is a debasement of our dollar. Most likely it's going to be an introduction to a new currency, as the Bible says, that we will not be able to buy or sell. So in order to completely control the currencies, they basically do at this point, of all nations have their own central bank. And our country itself has had a great wars and fights over this. If you go back into Andrew Jackson, he was a proponent of trying to not give it over to central banks. Even George Washington, there's a lot of history in our early years over central banks and giving power to a foreign investment bank to issue our money, because they understood that with this is power, and they don't even have to create fighting or wars. They can just create the money and the debt, and you're a slave to the system. So
I think my question is twofold. One, everyone is looking at the economy. They think, Trump is building the economy, which
does anybody really believe that? Okay.
but yeah, of course, with the moral, his moral standing,
With his
the whole
moral
thing is,
standards, yeah.
the whole thing is that the economy is building. So twofold, that and the tariff wars, or what's going in place now. How is that playing out to this statement here by Ellen G. White, or what you're presenting?
It's a race to the bottom.
How does that
When you have tariff wars, yeah, maybe Bowers as well. Yeah. Okay. So when you have tariff wars and these trade wars, it's a continuation of a devaluation. So once one country starts to devalue their money, their goods become cheaper for the other country. It benefits them for a little bit, but the other country that trades with them, eventually their goods are too high, so they're not selling as much to the other country anymore, so they have to also, in line, go further down. Now, eventually, you're going to hit the point where you start at 100 and you're going to continue to go down and down and down until you're at 0, and actually negative. So this, at this point, is really showing that the changing of the circulating currency isn't going to be just in the United States. This is going to be a worldwide event. And we got a glimpse of it. What happened when the stock market, or the housing, popped? It was a worldwide event. But this is going to have to do with currency. And there's a certain power out there that's saying that they want the power over all currency. And again, it might be over there in Italy with the 7 Hills. So that was part of presentation 3. I don't know if I have it on.
2 things.
What was what?
Source.
Yes, let me pull it over. I have another presentation, which I go pretty deep into that. I think it's part 7. So let me look, and then I'll give you the exact source. Yes.
All right. So it's safer for us now, actually, to have property as opposed to items. But property has taxes on it as well. So how do we get around this? Really, no buy, no sell. You have property, and how do you get?
That's why it's going to be a time of trouble as never been before, because we're going to be like the Waldenses. They're going to come after our property as well.
Right.
And you have to pay your taxes. And again, if you don't accept, you saw how I brought that out as well. If you don't accept to pay in their money, then they won't take the money. And if you don't pay the taxes, then the full extent of the law will come down upon you.
True.
So, what are you going to do? You're going to have faith. The just shall live by faith.
Yeah.
There is no, and this is real. Yeah, and it's set up. It's set up. It's taken a while, and it's big.
This is another one.
It's
I don't
deep.
know whether it makes much sense, but I've been noticing that in some of the states I've gone to, that there's more health institutions that are being built. Patient first, doctors here, doctor on board. They have different names and let people, the general public know that doctors are here. It's almost in every other block. It's almost like a liquor store.
Yeah.
It's like health institutions all over the place. So is
Well,
that associated with this inflationary?
In a way,
aspect?
because in Revelation as well, it talks about the Magi, and it talks about pharmakia, right? Which is your pharmacy, and all the sorceries that are going to happen in the last days will be caused by, well, they talk about the economic deceptions. It brings up the pharmaceutical companies, basically, and basically entertainment as well, that all of these things are going to be intertwined. If you've never looked up the Seven Hills, I was having a talk with Brother Raphael earlier this week as well. Look up some presentations on the Seven Hills and what those represent and the entertainment and everything, and you'll get a very good sense. Do you remember the gentleman that you sent me? What his name was? Yeah. I can look it up quickly. Okay. But that would be good. They are all intertwined, and money has to do with part of it. Entertainment has to do, your movies and media and all. I forget exactly down the line, but they're all intertwined together. I'm sorry?
David Barton is part of that.
David
Barton, Wall Builders?
Wall Builders.
Yes.
David Barton.
David Barton,
There it is.
yes.
Brother Powers?
Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm going way ahead of your presentation.
No problem.
You can tell me, and then I'll just close this question down. Are we getting away from a currency system without going only to credit?
Yes. Not completely current. I mean, it's debt. That's all it is now.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
And then that's, of course, so that they can track and most likely understand that. I believe a lot of this surveillance, a lot of other things that are happening in the last days, God is allowing this stuff to happen because he's going to try his true people. He's going to put them through the fire. And I believe when this comes down, us that are saying we're commandment keepers, well, they have surveillance everywhere. They know what you buy. They know where you go on your websites. They know everything. They're going to come back and say, just like Satan, well, you say you're a commandment keeper, but I pulled up this, and look what he does. And they're going to go and character assassinate. So also, that's one of the reasons for credit as well. And I believe these are just going to be tools that Satan's going to try to shut us up. Yeah.
yeah, and with this new system that they're going to try eventually to implement, where you can't pass cash. You can't trace cash. You all know that, right? So if you walk in and you pay with cash, they can't trace that. But if they switch everything over to a credit system where you have to use your card and all of that stuff, it's a perfect way to track. And it's also a perfect way to press a button and shut down your bank account
Yes.
if they don't want you to use it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, 1 second. Sorry. No, it's okay. Yeah. I had a lot less spirit of prophecy in this, so I do apologize. And I hope you guys go back to the other ones, but I really tried to condense it down and
Yeah,
push as much as I could through. So
it dawned on me while you were talking, it reminded me that it dawned on me one day that it used to take over a weekend, like when the bank closed Friday, you could make purchases all the way till the bank opened the next time with the little magnetic strip. But now with that chip, it's instantaneous. So we're gravitating more and more towards instantaneous shutting down of everything.
it's okay. Who was it that asked me for the reference? Elaine?
Yeah, I remember in my days when I wasn't very frugal with money,
That's it.
and you used to get paid, you used to write a check thinking that you write that check, and by the end of next week, your paycheck would come in to put it against. You guys know what I'm talking about? Was I the only one that played those games? Yeah, it's all that's done now. All that's done. The other question I had was, how do we prepare for what's to come? Now, a lot of people, and no disrespect, a lot of people say, and what you should, go to the country. But when that system sets up, how are you going to pay your taxes? How are you going to buy food?
My last 3 are on that. I went over 2 of them. Portions.
I'm right.
Yeah.
Right. No, hold up.
But
If you're in
now.
the country, and I say you should go, I'm not against it, but I want to bring a realistic thing to this now. When you're in the country and you say, before the time of trouble start, I'm in the country, what are you going to do when they press the button and you can't pay your taxes? They're going to move you off your land. So it has to be based on. No, I'm not saying instantaneously. I'm just saying eventually it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But my point is this.
Also,
Whether
see
it
if you
takes
could pay
5
your
years,
taxes
2
in
years,
advance. That's a
100 years,
suggestion I have.
my point is you have to trust God.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can't put your trust in things. You can't put your trust in, I'm going to pile up a bunch of food, and when it starts, I'll be ready. You can't do that.
Well, here's one of the last, you said what? He said, what can we do when this all happens? The last 3, part 11, 12, and 13 are specifically on that. And you can see part 11 is, what's the solution? Jesus. And fearing and giving glory. Breaking free from the problem, the reaction, and their solution. Because he's the one with the answers.
I think also too, see, you can't prepare for something that you have no idea what's going to happen.
Look at the disciples in the upper room. They had no idea.
Right, you can't prepare. So I don't care what kind of plan you lay, because the whole thing is just like what you're saying.
But it doesn't mean
just
don't
like
prepare.
what you preach.
You should still work with.
No,
Yeah.
the preparing is when you have this bill that comes through you in the mail and you don't have the money. And instead of panicking and calling all your friends, you just get on your knees. Those little things that we're going through today is helping us build our faith in Christ. And so that's the preparing, building your faith in the trials and tribulations that we're all facing today. Because I'm telling you, we have no idea what's tomorrow, what we're going to be faced with tomorrow. And it's going to be nothing but faith. When you don't have a house, a car, money, useless, and it's just you standing somewhere with what? Nothing but your faith in God. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to go back about this whole country living thing and what you do then. Elder Lemon, he had a sermon out on YouTube a while back. It was talking about preparing the ark, you know, and history repeats itself. As it were in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of, just before the Lord comes. His argument was this. Noah, he was preaching the gospel, and that was his version of the 3 angels' message back then, okay? Meanwhile, he was preparing his ark for his family. So the temporal preparation was being worked on as well as the spiritual. This thing is going to be so serious, we have to take care of it, look at it in a practical way. We have to prepare for it temporally as well as spiritually. And from what I understand, the whole faith part, after the Sunday law, after probation is closed, that's where you go back into this whole 91st Psalms. The Lord will not let you dash your foot against a stone, and He's going to feed you with this. He's going to feed you up in the high mountain in the pavilion. That's when that kicks in. But before then, we have to have places to live. We have to have food to eat. We have to have secure places. We have to have good friendships with people where we can support each other, because that's what it's all coming down to, and it's going to be very real. if you look at what's going on in this world today, as Brother Powers was stating, everything is being monitored now. Everything is being surveilled. And I believe the reason for that is because the enemy is going to make it look so intimidating for you to go against the system that many people will just fall down and says, okay, it's not worth it. But again, as Brother Powell stated, this is the Lord's tool to purify us, to help us to have pure faith in Him. But like I said before, faith without works is dead. So it's not just spiritualizing everything away. I'm going to trust the Lord. And I said, the Lord wants us to do practical things in preparation for the storm that's coming.
I put what you were saying, basically, it's one of the slides up here.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, very crystal clear. I'm not saying, and I don't want anybody to come to me later and say, you're saying something wrong with country living. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you're putting your hopes in hiding away and all this other stuff, you are deceived.
That's right.
And that's what I'm trying to, let's build our foundation. We can do that, but let's build our foundation in God, and He says that He's going to provide for us when it look like we don't have anything for us. And that's my point. Do the country living. I'm for it. But don't make that your only
So that was
hope.
my next slide, and this one says, I see the necessity of people moving out of the cities into retired country places where they cultivate the land and raise their own produce. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis, country living, page 21. But go not to the country for temporal security alone. Seek your place on the land for the fuller, richer life you will find there. Make a home worthy of the name, not merely a shelter from heat and storm, or from the atomic bomb. Make it a place of peace and contentment, a progressive development of the intellectual and spiritual nature. Make it a school for the children and the parents, a medical center for the community, where all will learn of the broader, fuller joy of right living. And here, on the next point, we would suggest that after you are fully settled in a new rural home, you list the gains you have made in the realm of independence, and behold how astonishingly long that list becomes. So,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to also point this out too.
We're on the same page is all I'm saying, amen?
Yeah, we are. I want to point this out too. There was one presentation by Doug Batchelor that he made a while back. And by the way, he's been living out in the country for years.
Long time.
He knows all the ins and
90s,
outs about it. But one thing he stated was,
We lived in a cave.
he says, and he was concerned about this, it's the same exact point you're making. He was very concerned with a lot of people talking about fleeing to the mountain, just running to the mountains for the time and trouble. And he said, that's not what the Three Angels' message is about.
No, it's not.
The Three Angels' message is about letting the world know what's really happening so that everyone can be prepared. Then when your job is done, you go ahead and do what you got to do as far as move to the country. But he said, a lot of us are speaking as though we're afraid to stand up to our the duties that we're called to do. You catch what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so if we do that, we're making a big mistake. It's not about running out and just hiding. If it was about that, then we have missed our calling with the Three Angels' message. We have completely made it null and void. Anyone can hide. There's lots of preppers that do it.
So we need to be careful that if we are preparing that, really we're preparing for who God is going to send to our house as well, and preparing others in the same aspect. So that's been my wife and I's goal of what we've been doing, and it's it's a transition too. It's not just like I'm going to pick up and leave, and you also don't. A lot of failures happen when people move to the country and they take the city with them. Those are usually the ones that will say this wasn't for me, and many of them will lose faith and actually leave the church quite often as well. So I saw another, yes, David. Brother David, good to see you.
We say the just shall live by faith, but there's two factors in that.
Yes?
Not only is there faith, but there is just. Are we the just?
Yeah.
When Jesus said, one of you will betray me, they all said, is it I? Is it I? Are we questioning ourselves? Are we examining ourselves whether we're actually in the faith? Are we just? And what does that mean to be just? Does it mean I'm living the perfect life? Or does that mean that I have surrendered?
Facing life's
to
record.
God?
Go to Great Controversy, and if you want to find out what being just is, I would suggest reading that. Facing life's consequences, is it? Facing life's record. Facing life's record. And take a look at that, and I think that will be probably the best way to really find out whether or not we are just or not.
Well, we talk about repentance.
Uh-huh. And are we truly
But-
converted? That's the question.
But have we really repented?
Yeah.
Have we truly broken up the fallow ground? You know, have we fallen on the stone and been broken? It's something we all need to be asking ourselves, because otherwise we may not be just when we think we are.
Yeah.
And then we can say we have all kinds of faith, and then come up to that day when Jesus
Just
says,
like
I never
Peter.
knew you.
Well, you'd be just like Peter. It did take him a while, too, until after the crisis. So we don't know exactly when that point. Doesn't mean that if you aren't just yet that you shouldn't prepare. You work with God, and then you patiently wait for him to work with you as well.
You know, if we're just,
Mhm.
then he gives us his spirit that confirms to us that we are his.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a new delight for the law of God. We meditate on it day and night. He walks with us, and we have no fear. So all these issues are something that, it's not that they go away, but it's something that are doable now. The Lord, it gives us what we need to handle them.
You're no
However
longer
that
looking-
means retaining our homes or our property until the time when we have to give them up. And at that point, we're hanging on to this big rope, as big as we are, you know. And it may be a little nerve-wracking, but it's very doable. But at that point, because we're just, we're right with God.
You're making me think of the other presentation as well. I have it in here somewhere, I think. Anyway, we have another. Everybody looks so solemn. Don't look solemn. It's not I'm making everybody. Everyone wants to say, what are the solutions? I have 3 presentations on them. Do you want me to put them, like you want me to do another one? You guys want to take a break and I'll go forward with a portion? Just cut straight to the break, and we all kind of know things are coming. I was just trying to explain that. But then if you guys want to do that, I'll cut through as many as I can. Yes.
I'll talk to you
One more.
afterwards.
Sure. Brother Mason?
Out of everything that's been said, the big thing, it has been said, is faith today, and we're living right near the second coming of Christ. Now, just a little simple story. Years ago, I was talking to one of our lead call porter directors. He said, Brother Mason, you know, Ellen White makes the statement, before the First World War, we are now entering into the time of trouble, trouble that shall not cease until Jesus comes. Since that time, I personally have seen 2 world wars and subsequent wars, and continuing through the Depression of the 30s, because I was born in 1928. Okay, so therefore I lived and witnessed it. Now this is eyewitness I'm talking, you see. And the condition that he mentioned, Ella Warner mentioned back then, and Ella White makes a statement, we are now into the time of trouble, trouble that shall not cease until Jesus comes. Faith then is based on what you have believing in prophecy. And I've seen this prophecy fulfilled in my very eyes. That's why I'm looking. This is over 100 years ago now. Ella White makes a statement. This is 2021. You see, this is over 100 years ago she made a statement. And I do not see 1 ounce contrary to that statement that has not been fulfilled in these 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
We need faith. That's what I'm talking about. We need faith because we're right near the glorious day of the second coming of Christ.
Would you guys like to do like a 15 or 15-minute break and then come back? Would that work? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we can go ahead. I mean, actually, we can set up a time. I mean, right now it's 5 o'clock. I mean, we can give about another 30 minutes and then wrap it up. Because I mean, actually, you have a lot of stuff. I mean, because this stuff is interesting.
Yeah,
or we can actually, or we can.
I condensed 4. You guys just got 5 really condensed into like.
Or we can schedule
a very short.
Another date where we can.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We'll reschedule. We'll schedule another part. Because I mean, this is really interesting, and it just goes to show, you know, the stuff that we have our trust in, and it's mostly our money, our property, and our assets and stuff like that.
That's what we're all asking is, what can we do to save these things?
That's
God's not.
That's
really,
not going to be anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so if see, our carnal mind is thinking, okay, I can do this, I can do. There, you know,
we can
moving into the
a certain
country
way.
and all that stuff. What that would do and is help you get off the grid and stuff like that, and kind of stabilize yourself a little bit longer. Don't think it's not coming your way, but just a little bit longer until it hits you, because God wants our total faith in Him. And the only way we're going to realize it is once He puts us out there in the middle of the ocean, without a boat, without a paddle, without a motor, without nothing but you and Him. And He says, I'll take care of you. That's where He wants us all to be, you know? Yeah.
Isn't it, God want us to take and right now, at this time right now, He wants us to take and start living modest, okay, a modest type of lifestyle, like the Quakers, the Amish and stuff like that, Mennonites. To be truthful about a lot of us, when you look at us, we just like the world in a sense, as far as our lifestyle, as far as, you know, what we have, okay? But then when you look at the Quakers and people like that, they're so modest. And I think we need to get back to something like that. Maybe not all the way back.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, some of them are more, the Amish are the ones that don't use power, and then the Mennonites do use power. And the Quakers are more in the western Pennsylvania area. Yeah. Oh, and I have a special guest that wants to speak. My wife.
Well, I think God wants us to, you know, come out of the cities, you know.
We're getting
He's
corrupted
saying
here.
us, come out of her, my people, because He wants us to be somewhere where we can, where we are able to hear God and speak to God and be away from all these distractions of the city, where, you know, He's getting us ready for something better, and He wants us to build that relationship with Him, that we may be ready when He comes back. And so not for us to, you know, go here so we can be in control of our lives, but for us to build this relationship that when He comes, we can be ready.
I appreciate Sister Liz's comments, and it's kind of connecting and reinforcing the importance of moving out to the country. And it's interesting because sometimes we can get distracted by the challenges and the persecution that's coming, you know, and we almost connect, okay, moving to the country to escaping from that. But as we're reinforcing, not only is our true, we've been talking about it, our true physical safety in God, right? I'm totally not saying don't move to the country. Yes, move to the country, okay? But your physical safety is in God, okay? But what I'm also realizing, okay, I almost had to stand up, is that our best and our ultimate safety is our spiritual safety and being like Christ. And when our name comes up in judgment, he's like, she's mine. He's mine. And then that's why he says, don't be afraid of those who can kill the body, but not the soul. Fear the one who can kill the body and the soul. You have a heaven to win and a hell to shun. And being out in the country helps you, speeds you along in the perfecting of your character, which takes you to the ultimate safety, which is the spiritual safety. And that's why you need to move to this physical location, but because it's connecting you, getting you faster, easing your way, and it's a challenging way already, but spurring you on to that spiritual safety, which is likeness to Christ.
And country living, by the way, is not easy, so I tell my wife all the time, a country boy's work's never done. It's an amazing thing once you get out there, you'll find out how much work God really has prepared for you in the wilderness. Wow.
I appreciate all of the comments. I believe that God is leading us, and he's told us what's coming and what to do. And we sometimes some of us are struggling with, well, how do I get to the country if my money is small? How do I get there? And it takes some figuring out to get to that point. But God said what to do. He said, move to the country because, and he said that so that we could, as he leads the way and as he opens the door, he said, because the time of no buying and no selling will be a very serious one, where we can grow our own food. You can't grow but so much food in the city and the suburbs. You have to dig up your whole backyard, and I've tried it.
All right,
it's a lot of digging.
She brought up
if you need to eat and you can't buy or sell, you need to grow. So now you need to know how to grow. So if you are in the city or suburb, do little things now to learn how to grow. The country also is good for spiritual rest. Come rest a while. We're not going to go straight from the country into heaven. Oh, I wish we could. But God also said that every earthly support will be removed. So then that would mean even the garden that I was making so that I could eat when I couldn't buy or sell, that would be removed, yes. But lo, I am with you always. If every earthly support is removed, is God leaving me hanging to figure it out? He's not. Neither would a loving parent, leave their child to figure it out in the worst calamity. They wouldn't do that. They would say, look out, be careful, and I'm going to be right behind you or beside you or in front of you. So really, God is giving us a beautiful experience that is hard to imagine how to get through. We haven't gone through that ever. We've never gone through such a serious time with him before. But he says, trust me, I'm coming. So country living involves the quietness, to get the mind quiet from the noises we dealt with in city and urban life. But it's a place to get closer to your Creator, to hear his voice and move on that voice, because we need faith. When all earthly support is removed, you need faith in the God who says, I'm with you. I haven't seen you, God. I'm with you. Walk this way. Stop. Say this. Turn back. Come here. He'll fly you wherever he's got to fly you. Put manna from heaven if he has to, send ravens to give you food. This is our God. He is faithful. That's why we serve him.
Amen. But she did make one comment. She said, some of us don't have much money to move to the country. Sister Mel and I talk about this. This is a property that Liz and I purchased, and it's got 2 acres and this great big house, and that was the price, okay? So to move to the country, it's not necessarily expensive, but this house has required some character building traits that, yes. And also, when you talk about the losing of support, I've watched that happen, and what do? You just continue to pray, because there's a lot of things I didn't know how to plumb, set tile, put new floors in, walls. I don't have all the tools and everything. I had to find out what to do to even mow the grass. It's a lot of grass. And that's why I'm so sunburned today, because there's a lot of grass. And it takes a long time, especially when it's cut. And, putting a garden in and tilling that. I brought my little tiller and thought I was going to do it. And I put it down, and it goes, it did nothing. Did nothing. It was like rock. And I said, all right, Lord, what do I do now, I thought I'd just be up here and la, 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 just till along. Nothing, Like, you think it's going to be easy? No. I had to go and find another guy that had a tractor that came over and, like a 10-foot, and he put that thing down, and I was like, wow. That's amazing. These are all different things. He puts different people in your life, one after another, and then he continues to build your faith. Because there's been plenty of times I'm up there, and it's like, I remember one time I went up, I'm planning to get some work done. I brought Donovan with me. I'm all excited. And the next day, we got 18 inches of snow. And I was like, it was unexpected, completely unexpected. And it just happened over and over and over. Every time I went up there, it was raining for like 5 days. I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do? I'm trying to get other stuff done, and it's raining, it's pouring, it's too hot, it's too cold. And then the people that I had contracted out with, they were like, yeah, I'm sorry, something else happened. I'm like, I drove 3 hours up here, And then the Lord kind of opens up something else, and then I stopped by a Mennonite shop one day with my son. And I just happened to stop in. I was going to go get a pie for someone that helped me to mow this grass next door to me. I'll give this little testimony real quick. So next door, this guy comes over. The front end of my lawnmower was doing this to me, and trying to turn it wasn't happening, and I thought maybe I broke the axle on it, but I was bound determined I was going to get this thing done. And I was there for about 6 hours and mowing and trying to go up the hill and go all the way around so I could run it as fast as I could down the hill to get it to mow, and the grass was like this. Well, the guy comes over, my next door neighbor, he saw me struggling, I kept having to get off the thing and then push it and all this stuff. So I decided I was going to go get a pie for helping him, or for him helping me one day when all the rain just started one day. And I said, well, what else can I do? I said, well, I get stuck, and that guy was in the back of my mind, and he go get him a pie. So I go all the way up to this Mennonite area, get this pie. I stop in with my son because I wanted to see if they had, the Mennonites, if they had anything that was more like manual instead of power tool kind of stuff. So I stop in, and it was like a barn feeding kind of thing, animals. It was a neat store, but I really didn't need anything in there. And I walk around, and the guy behind, the owner behind the cash register is like, oh, hey, can I help you? Here's my card. And I looked at the card, and his name was Amos. So, of course, I said, well, Amos, that's a great name. It's a small book, but that's a great name. He said, are you a believer? And I said, yeah. So I got in there. It was about 4:30. I have to ask Donovan. Do you think, 4:30-ish when we went in there? And next thing you know, we started getting into step after step about the Sabbath, about the state of the dead, about everything. I left the store at 7:15. I noticed when I went in, there was a couple of people, then it kind of emptied out quickly. So I got home, and I'm telling Liz, I said, man, I shared the gospel from the beginning to the end. And we went scripture after scripture. And he still wasn't convinced about the Sabbath, but you could see he was interested. And before I left, I asked if we could pray, and he even denied to pray together. And I said, well, even if you won't pray, I'll still pray for you as well. He said, well, we don't see things eye to eye. But it was a great speech, great talk with him, and I finally got the pie back. It was 7:30. I got home, I looked at the card. He had closed at 5 o'clock. So I got in there at 4:30, talked to him for a good 30 minutes, and he still stuck around another 2 hours. So that was, to say something about that. The next day I go over to go bring the pie over to the next door neighbors, and Donovan and I are knocking on the door, and nobody was coming, and I'm like, oh, this thing's supposed to be frozen. It already took us 20 minutes to get there. It had sat out the day before, too, for 2 hours. And I'm like, I hope and pray this is still good. The blueberry pie. Well, anyways, the lady comes up, and I thought, oh, she looks familiar. That's interesting. And she's like, oh, hey. And I said, I want to bring you guys a pie because really appreciate you coming to help. Your husband. And she's like, come on in. So Donovan and I walked in. We start talking, and they're talking on stuff. And I'm looking around, and I look on. She had a piano, and next to the piano, she had the Sabbath lesson for Romans, or for Acts. And I looked, and I said, first when I went in, I was looking, and I was like, this is a simple home. And they have a wood burner, and they had a wood-burning stove. And it's just very simple. It's like either they know something's about to happen, or they're Seventh-day Adventists, kind of like, in my mind, or they grew up in older times because they were in their 70s probably. I said, are you Seventh-day Adventists? They said, yeah. I said, really? That is amazing. So I started telling them my story. I started telling them how I got up to Pennsylvania and how we came across this property, how we thought we were maybe being selfish and all this other stuff. And then it hit me. I said, wait, there's not that many Seventh-day Adventist churches in this area. I thought, well, I wonder which church they go to. So one of the reasons I'm up there is because of Brother John Shepherd and Ayanna Shepherd, the Shepherds. And they go to a place called Needmore Church. Well, coming around, they said, oh, we go to Needmore Church, which is 30 minutes away from there, maybe actually about 35 or 40 minutes from there. That town only has 900 people. Not Needmore, but this is Wells Tannery, right? And so, what are the chances my next door neighbors are going to be Seventh-day Adventists? And it all happened because it was raining and I was getting depressed and I couldn't sit in the house anymore. So the Lord impressed me to go get this, and then I led over to the next place to talk to a Mennonite about all of what the Seventh-day Adventists believe. And then he leads me to the next place, and then he confirms to me, I got this. I knew where you were going to be way before all this, don't worry. So we still haven't figured out exactly what's what, but it's been a lot of work. So that's the character I think that he wants to build, even out of despair when we are in the country and driving an hour to each place, and then they close and they don't have what you want, and then the frustration and how he leads you to different people. It's interesting. So, one more question?
Yes. Well, I was just wondering, like, I'm from the city, so.
Me too.
Thinking of moving to the country. That's always been like I've always wanted a farm and some land and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes I feel that God sort of puts us where he wants us to be, because it was heavy on my mind, especially when you're saying, well, where it says for us to move to the country. Mm-hmm. Well, I've tried it, but it seems like God wants me in the city.
Shuts it down,
because,
right? He shut down your opportunities?
Yeah, pretty much.
He did that to me, so it took me quite a while, and then all of a sudden it opened up.
Pretty much. So I'm just wondering where that was. Is that something that we are supposed to do, like the next generation? Do we want them to, should we telling them to move to the country?
I believe it's our generation, I really do. And I think we should at least be preparing our way out. At least have a farmette, if you can. And if you're talking about the price of a car, sacrifice a new car and get a house and start working on it. even if it's a weekend warrior kind of aspect, it's gonna build your character, because it's difficult and it's frustrating. And the Lord will give you so many different talents and so many people along the way that will continue to build your faith. And I believe He wants all of us to go through that, so that we can be a blessing to others too, because other people are going to be coming from the city that know nothing, just like us city boys that come to the country, and these country guys know how to do all this stuff, and they're like, look at this city slicker. Watch him over here try to get his lawnmower up with his broken axle, all this. But they come and help you, and then you just see how it continues to build. Yes, you're welcome. God bless. Okay.
I didn't hear everything, but I could see from the graph that
Oh, this is an older one.
that is like awesome. Having been a college grad, and I realized the whole thing years later, that I went through this program to get my bachelor's degree, and all somebody did was give me a piece of paper and shake my hand and say congratulations. And I owe I left owing $25,000. Now it's up to $47,000, and I still haven't gotten that bachelor's job for that. I'm just like, that would be the very best investment, is having a home. Right now, that's my prayer. I get a home in a country where my kids can have a place of refuge. And that's,
there's some of your others.
So praise the Lord. This
Yeah.
is good.
Okay.
That's it, yeah.
I think that'll be it. Shall we end in prayer then? I thank you guys. I've enjoyed this. This has been very well. Maybe we can do something once a month at least, not, so I don't have to recap the entire thing and try to blow everybody's mind up. I think it's a lot to take in and try to recap stuff, and because you see how it continues to build and build and build on each other. And that's kind of the aspect of it, to show you just kind of how big, once you peel back the onion, really how far you have to keep going. Yeah. It's such a massive tentacles that are out there. It's like octopus with all its...
Yeah, maybe we can look at that, yeah.
Yeah, so, all right. Well, she likes, okay. Yeah, these are from Adventist Home, chapter 61. Okay. Well, end us in a word of prayer, and we still have a few hours before the Sabbath's over, so I have had a wonderful and a good time, and I think my throat's ready to give up, but that's okay. All right, so if we can at least bow our heads, I'd appreciate it. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your holy Sabbath day. We thank you for giving us the insight of what things are to come. Lord, I pray that I didn't go too far in speaking on your Sabbath about these earthly things and troubles that we all go through, and even finances and money. Lord, you did speak much on the aspect of money to us, and you speak to us still today and warn us of all the tentacles that are out there that are tangling us and making it hard for us to grasp you and your purity without all these deceptions and things that we want to hold on to, when we should just seek towards the new heaven and the new Jerusalem coming from the heaven. And you've already prepared a house for us, and you've already stated that there is a mansion there with a room for all of us. So we pray that we can see that one day, and the gold and the clear gold of the streets and all the majestic things that you have created with your hands, Lord. So get us there, keep our mind focused up and onward, and be with us as we do look towards country living and showing each of us what that really means. It's a step-by-step process, I believe. So I have seen that, Lord, you have opened up times that I have been able to go up there to work. Other times you shut the door and say, I want you to go out and go into the community. And other times you say, I want you to go back to work and go back into the city, and I have another project for you. So, Lord, though we don't see clearly now, we will understand one of these days. So we thank you for all that you've shown us, all that you continue to show us, and please guide each one of us. And I pray that you give us your spirit to overcome all of our cherished for a better word, idols in our lives, that we can see and only see you and your glory, and that we may show this glory to others as well. So I pray all these things in Jesus' holy name. Amen.